Have you ever felt the need to just pick up and go? To leave everything behind and step into the unknown? Have you felt the call to adventure? And if so, how did you answer? In 2016, I was working on a startup that I had co-founded. We had spent about a year building this thing, and we were on the cusp of getting an angel round of investments, but my heart wasn't in it. The thought of working on this startup for the next decade of my life felt heavy. It felt dead. I looked inside and asked myself, if we were to succeed and sell the company for hundreds of millions, then what? Then what would I do? And the answer came immediately. I would go on adventures. I would hike the Appalachian Trail. I would explore the world. So I had to decide, do I want to pursue this opportunity that I'm not excited about in order to make a lot of money, or do I want to take the risk, throw everything away, and follow my heart? Ultimately, I decided to follow my heart and thru-hike the Appalachian Trail. My name is Jack Jones, and this is my story. Driving down to Georgia felt distinctly surreal. Doubts and fears were racing through my mind, and honestly, I felt a bit like I was in shock, like I was out of my body, and I wondered if I was making a huge mistake. But there was no turning back now. My girlfriend dropped me off at Amicalola Falls State Park, and I headed up the approach trail, carrying everything I would need for the next 6 months on my back, and boy was it heavy. My pack was a solid 46 pounds that day. The approach trail is an 8.5 mile trail that brings you up to the official start point of the AT, which is on top of Springer Moutain in Georgia, so my first day of grueling hiking didn't even count as part of the Appalachian Trail. And grueling it was. You first climb about 600 flights of stairs to get over Amicalola Falls, and then there's another 7 miles of climbing before you get to the summit of Springer Mountain.
There is an endless series of stairs, and I'm not even done with the first mile yet.
Somewhere along the way, I missed the memo that hiking the Appalachian Trail meant climbing over several hundred mountains. I thought it would take me 2 to 3 hours to hike those 8.5 miles. It actually took me over 9 hours.
It's day 2. I just left Springer Mountain. I did about 8.5 miles yesterday. Feeling good, feeling strong. This is everything that I've hoped it would be. Having a lot of fun.
I remember being awestruck by the sheer size of the trees, and I remember that they seemed to glow with this green vitality that was more green than anything I'd ever seen before, and I was surprised by the amount of creeks and springs that I came across. I guess when I thought of mountains, I always pictured a barren and rocky expanse like the Himalayas, and not this explosion of green and water and life. On my second day, I came across Long Creek Falls, and according to Bob, who is the owner of the Top of Georgia Hostel, a party of Spanish conquistadors were killed here by Native American braves, but I couldn't find any supporting information during my research, so I'll just chalk this up as a fun trail story that may or may not be true. At the end of day 2, I arrived at a crowded campsite near the Gooch Mountain Shelter where I set up my hammock and got to know the other hikers. This is Priest, Barron, and Filbert. So Priest is in the red shirt and Barron is in the green shirt, and they were doing a 250-mile section up to Clingman's Dome in the Smokies. And Filbert is in the navy shirt, and he was doing a section up to Franklin, North Carolina. His plan was to do small sections year after year until he could complete the whole AT. There's Ron and his wife, and they're from Florida, and then in the tent is Caitlin from Atlanta, and she had been inspired to come out and hike a week on the Appalachian Trail because of the movie Wild. This is Andrea, and I swear half of her pack was filled with clothes because she had 2 sets for camp and 2 sets to hike in, and I just don't know how she had any room for anything else in her pack. This is Tusi from Hawaii, and she took the summer off to hike up to Harper's Ferry, and she would make it there about a week before I did. This is Sharkbait and Jingle Bells from New York City, and Jingle Bells was terrified of bears, so she wore these big bear bells that would jingle with every step, hence her trail name, and you could always hear her bells tinkling before you saw her coming down the trail. People often ask me, what do you do when you get to camp? Well, you'll set up your camp, you'll go down to the water source and fill it up from the creek or a spring or a river, and then you'll cook your food and you'll eat, and if you have the energy, you might build a fire. But after all that's done, usually it's getting to be dark, and then everyone's going to be asleep in their tents by 8 p.m. So Sunset is called hiker midnight because you just don't have the energy to stay up late at night after hiking all day. On day 4, I climbed up Blood Mountain, the highest point on the AT in Georgia. There was quite a bit of nervous chatter in camp the day before as people mentally prepared themselves for that climb, and it's funny to look back now at how much we anticipated Blood Mountain because it doesn't even rank in the top 25 of the most difficult climbs on the AT. From the top of Blood Mountain, it was a short 3-mile hike down to Neel Gap, home of mountain crossings, a hiker hostel, and gear shop. According to trail lore, fully 25% of people who attempt a thru hike will quit when they reach Neel Gap. It was the first taste of civilization that I had in 4 days, and I took full advantage by eating a large pizza and then all of Barron's leftovers.
Yeah, we're at Mountain Crossings. So this is a facility that's was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was finished in 1937, coincidentally, the same year the Appalachian Trail was finished. It's the only place where the trail goes through a building in our breezeway there. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place. The building itself is owned by the state of Georgia, but it's a private business. And it's been operating as an outfitter since 1983. Yeah, my name's Matt. People on trail call me Pretzel. My high school mascot was a pretzel. And it took down George W. Bush. So that's our claim to fame, depending on your politics. And we have this cool little pretzel gang sign. Yeah, I hiked the Appalachian National Scenic Trail in 2012. And then I caught the bug and hiked the Long Trail, which runs north-south through Vermont. And then the Colorado Trail in 2014, and then last summer I had enough bank in the bank account to do the Pacific Crest Trail. I love all the trails. But yeah, I love Slayer and I love Jurassic 5. One's a metal band and one's a early 2000s hip hop collective. Yeah. So I love two great bands, two great trails. They all have their pros and cons, and whatever's out there, you'll find it. You know, I just like eating Snickers bars on mountains and remote places, and I love pushing myself to my limits. And then there are hikers that have religious experiences. Never, it's not me. People do it, to find themselves. So I just love hiking, love walking, and best people hike long trails. So I've met a lot of the best people. See a majority of the people that are attempting northbound thru hikes. See a lot of people that don't know what's going on. That's all right. It's all right. You either figure it out or you don't. We jokingly say that, but it's true. Figure out how to make the gear setup you have work, or you go home. Saw a 90-pound pack in the guy this December, and the guy refused to shake down. So he had a 60-liter auxiliary dry bag that was just hanging and swinging off of his pack. I can't stop them from going north. That's the best part. And I love not knowing who makes it, who doesn't. I love not being like, that guy's never gonna make it. I love, you never know. It's the grit and stupidity that gets you there. Nothing else. The gear helps, but
Eating some delicious tuna with a bunch of cayenne peppers in it. It's day 5. I'm about 46 miles in if you include the approach trail. Got to camp on top of a mountain last night. That was really cool. Saw a really beautiful sunset, and I saw a sunrise this morning, and the hills were all, the mountains were all covered in fog, and the sun rose up through that fog, and it really looked like an explosion from the distance. It was really cool. It felt like we were on this floating island, and but there was no water source up there, so I was completely out of water this morning, and I had to hike 3 miles in to get water, and it was pretty rough. Hiked up a mountain, just dying, and I was running and finally found the spring and got some water resupply. Now I'm gonna hike on, probably go another 12 miles today to Blue Mountain Shelter and go from there. I encountered my first big storm on day 6, and this was a big storm. It rolled into the mountains in the afternoon without any warning, and I had no choice but to walk through it because there was simply nowhere to take shelter. I remember walking over these super slick wet rocks, and dime-sized hail was coming down on top of me in sheets, and I could hear trees falling in the distance blown over by the wind, and I just thought to myself, yep, this is what I wanted. I wanted an adventure, and here it is. And I just kept walking and eventually made it to the shelter, and of course the rain stopped just as I arrived. And this was everyone's first big rainstorm, and nobody wanted to sleep outside, so you ended up with 18 hikers in an 8-person shelter. And as you can imagine, it smelled absolutely horrible. So imagine 18 hikers who haven't showered for a week, all of their clothes and socks are wet, and it just absolutely reeked in there. So I opted to sleep in my hammock outside. Coming up in part 2, eating fried chicken in a Gone with the Wind themed restaurant, and the rainstorms continue. If you don't want to miss an episode, you can sign up for my email newsletter at www.thejourney.co and receive email updates when new episodes are released. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about the Appalachian Trail, leave a comment down below and I will address those questions in future episodes.